My daughter-in-law texted me, "Heat up the leftovers. We'll be home at 7:30. No greeting, no request. Just an order sent at 6:47 p.m. while I was sitting at my weekly book club, surrounded by women who actually valued my time. That text wasn't a request. It was the final straw in 6 months of being treated like a live-in servant. My name is Margaret, 62 years old, recently retired, and apparently, according to my daughter-in-law, now part of the household appliances. Brittany and my son Daniel had moved in temporarily after their wedding. Just until we save for a house, they'd said. I'd imagined shared dinners, laughter, a warm, slow transition into the next chapter of my life. Instead, somewhere along the way, I became the maid. It started subtly. Could you toss our laundry in with yours? Since you're already out, could you grab groceries? You cook so well. Would you mind making dinner? Small favors became chores. Chores became schedules. Schedules became expectations. And suddenly, I had a job again. Except this one didn't include weekends off, vacation days, or a salary. It wasn't that I was helping them. It was that they expected it. Every morning, Brittany left a to-do list on the counter like she was briefing staff. Bathrooms, vacuum laundry. 3 loads. Grocery list. Brand names highlighted. Real dinner tonight. No pasta. Not please. Not thank you. Just pressure. That morning, I'd told her I had a dental appointment and lunch with my sister. Brittany blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. You don't work. What else do you have to do? That sentence lodged itself under my ribs like a splinter. Not because it was cruel, but because she genuinely believed it. In her mind, retirement meant availability. My time meant hers. My home meant hers. She had no idea the house she was commanding me in was mine. Not my son's. Not shared. Not inherited. Mine. My husband and I had paid for it over 34 years of double shifts, sacrifices, and dreams. The deed said Margaret Whitmore. Not Daniel. Not Brittany. But entitlement is blind, and Brittany was blind. When someone starts treating kindness as weakness, you don't correct them. You show them. When the text came during book club, ordering me home, I felt every woman at the table watching my face change. Heat up the leftovers. Not could you? Not would you mind? Just do it. Eleanor leaned closer, reading my expression like a mother reading a child's fever. That girl doesn't need a mother-in-law, she whispered. She needs consequences. The room erupted quietly with agreement, soft murmurs, knowing nods, sympathetic grimaces. Because other people always notice the disrespect long before we're ready to admit it. Sometimes it takes an outsider to say out loud what we refuse to see. For 6 months, I had been rationalizing. They're young. They're stressed. It's temporary. Temporary had roots now, and those roots were strangling me. What Brittany didn't know was that I hadn't been tolerating it. I'd been collecting it. Every list she wrote, every dismissive text, every chore assigned like a task to a service employee. I had spoken to a lawyer. I had options. Legal options. Because legally, Brittany was a tenant without a lease, and tenants, especially rude ones, can be removed. Brittany was about to learn that you should never treat someone like a servant, especially when they own the house. I stared at her text one more time, feeling no anger anymore, only clarity. I typed 3 words. Dinner won't be ready. And then I added a 4th sentence I had never typed before. We need to talk. I stood up from book club, calm and steady, not defeated, not hurt, done. I drove home, not to heat up leftovers, but to heat up reality. And when I walked through that door, Brittany and my son would learn a lesson. I wasn't the help. I was the homeowner. Before I explain how everything changed, You need to know who I used to be, not by name or age, but by belief. Before Brittany moved into my home, I believed kindness solved everything. I believed that saying yes made me a good person. I believed that helping family meant sacrificing parts of yourself without expecting anything in return. I believed boundaries were unnecessary with the people you loved. Looking back, I realize those beliefs made me the perfect target. I used to be someone who filled silence with service. If someone needed something, I handled it. If something was broken, I fixed it. If someone was upset, I soothed them before I even considered how I felt. I carried my relationships like projects, things I could maintain through effort, planning, and emotional labor. For 35 years, I taught teenagers to speak up, articulate their needs, and defend their boundaries. Yet somehow, somewhere between losing my husband and wanting to feel useful again, I forgot to defend my own. After my husband passed, the house became a museum of memories. His coffee mug stayed on the same shelf. His coat hung on the hook by the back door. I ate dinner standing at the counter because sitting at the table alone hurt too much. I kept the TV on at night just to drown out the sound of silence. Daniel, my son, became my lifeline. He stopped by after work, fixed things, called to check in. Every time he said, "Mom, I've got it," a little piece of me stitched itself back together. Grief blurs your boundaries. You start accepting behavior you never would have tolerated when you were whole. So when Daniel brought Brittany into our lives, I wanted, desperately, to like her. I wanted to believe that my son had found someone kind. I wanted to believe that I was gaining a daughter. Brittany knew exactly how to present herself. Polite, attentive, charming, full of admiration. She studied me the way someone studies a house they plan to renovate. She asked questions about holiday traditions, our family recipes, my garden. She praised everything: my cooking, my backyard roses, the house itself. Her interest felt warm back then. Now I understand it was access. She wasn't bonding with me. She was collecting information. She learned that I loved feeling needed. She learned that I hated conflict. She learned that I'd rather do something myself than inconvenience someone else. And once she knew that, the rest was easy. When Daniel proposed in my living room on Christmas Eve, under the garland I had hung around the fireplace, I cried because I thought my family was expanding. I didn't know I was handing over the key to the kingdom. The wedding was perfect. Small, elegant, intimate. I paid for catering, flowers, the officiant. My way of saying welcome to the family. Brittany hugged me and said, "I could never do this without you." I thought it was gratitude. It was strategy. Some people don't see generosity as kindness. They see it as permission. When they asked to stay just for a few months to save money, I felt honored that they wanted to start their married life with me in the home, filled with their childhood memories. The house that once felt too quiet now felt alive. We made dinner together, watched movies, shared laughter. Then the shift began. Slow, subtle, calculated. It started with compliments wrapped in request. "You're such a good cook. Can you handle dinner tonight? You're already out. Can you grab groceries while you're there? You have more flexible time. Can you throw in our laundry?" Each request sounded reasonable, logical even. And I wanted to help. I wanted to feel useful again. I wanted to stay connected to my son. But first-time favors turned into recurring expectations. By the third month, I was the household engine, cooking every meal, cleaning every space, washing every load of laundry, grocery shopping alone. Every time I tried to lightly suggest sharing responsibilities, Brittany had a justification ready. "We pay utilities. You're retired. We work full-time. It just makes sense." It was astonishing how quickly appreciation turned into entitlement. The transition from thank you to you're supposed to happens quietly, until suddenly, you don't recognize your own life anymore. The first time I told Brittany I couldn't complete something because I had plans, she stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You don't work," she said. "What else do you have to do?" That sentence cracked something inside me. My time, my retirement, my life had become a resource she believed she controlled. My book club night became inconvenient. My dentist appointment became bad timing. My personal life became flexible. Each time I surrendered a plan to avoid tension, I lost a piece of myself. I stopped gardening. I stopped volunteering. I stopped seeing friends. I shrank so they could expand. When someone benefits from your absence, they will continue to erase you. But the shift wasn't just practical. It was emotional. Brittany stopped asking. She started instructing. Sticky notes with lists, text messages with demands, comments like, "Make sure dinner fits my diet." I started apologizing for not anticipating their needs. Apologizing. In my own house. Every boundary dissolved under the belief that family helps family. Until the night Brittany sent the text that changed everything. "Heat up the leftovers. We'll be home at 7:30. Make sure there's enough for both of us." No greeting. No please. No acknowledgement that I existed beyond what I provided. That was the moment I realized. They weren't asking for help. They expected service. And I finally remembered. I own this house. I had allowed this dynamic. And I could end it. The woman they were treating like a servant was about to become the homeowner again. The first crack in my tolerance for being treated like household staff appeared 3 weeks before the leftovers text, when I discovered that Brittany had been telling her friends and coworkers that she had a live-in housekeeper, not a mother-in-law. Sometimes you don't realize how someone really views you until you hear how they describe you to others. The discovery happened by accident. Brittany left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she was showering. A video call notification appeared from someone named Sarah. Before I could call for Brittany, the call auto-connected, and suddenly I was staring at a stranger on the screen. "Oh, you must be Brittany's housekeeper," the woman said cheerfully. "She's told me so much about how helpful you are with the house." I froze. Housekeeper. Not mother-in-law. Not homeowner. Housekeeper. "She's in the shower," I finally managed to say. "I'll tell her you called." Sarah smiled. "She's lucky. Must be nice having someone take care of the house so she can focus on her career." It didn't just show how Brittany treated me. It showed how she wanted others to see me. When Brittany came downstairs, wrapped in a towel and humming like she hadn't just detonated a grenade, I confronted her. "Your friend thinks I'm your housekeeper." She didn't even blink. "I didn't say you were literally a housekeeper, but you do handle the housekeeping. It's not inaccurate. I handle housekeeping in my own home, while you live here as my guest." Brittany lifted her chin. "Guest? We pay utilities and groceries. We're tenants." That was the moment everything shifted. Brittany didn't see herself as a guest being helped. She saw herself as a paying tenant. And me as the staff. The moment someone starts claiming rights instead of showing gratitude, your kindness has been reclassified as their entitlement. "You're not tenants," I said. "You're family members I agreed to help temporarily." "Well, if we're all living here, everyone should contribute according to their abilities. You have more free time, so household tasks make sense for you." Free time. As if retirement meant available on demand. When someone sees your time as a resource they can allocate, you're no longer a person. You're labor. That night, I told Daniel what had happened. I expected disbelief, support, even outrage. What I got instead felt like betrayal in slow motion. "Mom, I think Brittany has a point," he said. "You are home most of the time, and we pay expenses. so dividing tasks based on who's available seems fair. I stared at my son, the boy I raised to value respect and reciprocity. Daniel, this is my house. Helping you doesn't mean I work for you. No one said you work for us. We're just being practical. Betrayal doesn't always sound cruel. Sometimes it sounds reasonable. After that conversation, something inside me cracked. Because now I knew. Brittany didn't just view me as a housekeeper. Daniel did too. Over the next few weeks, Brittany stopped asking and started assigning. The bathrooms need cleaning before my mom visits. Make sure our laundry is done before Friday. We need the kitchen deep cleaned. It's embarrassing when people visit. Each sentence delivered with CEO confidence, like she was speaking to staff. I tried pushing back. Brittany, your mother is visiting. Shouldn't you prepare for her visit? I work Friday. Daniel has a client dinner. You're available. Available. When someone schedules your time without asking, they've removed your autonomy. It didn't end there. Brittany began leaving written chore lists on the kitchen island. Not suggestions, assignments. Clean the freezer, organize the pantry, steam clean the sofa. I'd spent 35 years teaching teenagers about respect and responsibility. Yet here I was, being bossed around by a woman who wasn't even alive when I started my teaching career. The loss of dignity doesn't happen all at once. It happens through a series of small, silent surrenders. 3 weeks of lists. 3 weeks of demands. 3 weeks of justifying disrespect with efficiency. And then came the text. Heat up the leftovers. We'll be home at 7:30. Make sure there's enough for both of us. Not a request. An order. In that moment, everything crystallized. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't miscommunication. This was who Brittany became the moment she believed I wouldn't push back. They thought I was too scared to lose them. They forgot it was my house. They thought I needed them. They were wrong. During the weeks leading up to the leftovers text, I began documenting the daily reality of my situation with the same methodical attention I once used to track student progress. And what I discovered was a systematic pattern of exploitation disguised as family cooperation. Sometimes you need to write down what's happening to you to finally see how abnormal it's become. I started keeping a notebook. At first, it was simply to stay organized, but within days, it became evidence. A log of how completely my life had been rearranged around Brittany and Daniel's needs. Monday. Cleaned 3 bathrooms, did 4 loads of laundry, grocery shopped for specific brand requests, prepared dinner according to Brittany's dietary restrictions, cleaned the kitchen afterward. Time spent, 6.5 hours. Brittany complained that I bought the wrong brand of organic pasta. Daniel didn't acknowledge dinner or cleanup. Tuesday. Vacuumed the entire house, dusted living room and bedrooms, prepared lunch for Brittany to take to work, started dinner prep at 3 p.m. so it would be ready at 6 p.m. Time spent, 5 hours. Brittany told me that going forward, dinner needed to be ready by 5:30 p.m. because her schedule had shifted. Seeing it written down made it impossible to deny. I was working a full-time job with no pay, no appreciation, and no agency. The notebook also tracked how they spent their time while I completed their tasks. Most entries look like this. Wednesday. After I spent the day cooking and cleaning, Brittany and Daniel ordered takeout because they weren't in the mood for what I prepared. They ate in front of the TV, left trash and containers on the coffee table, and later complained that the kitchen looked messy. When someone assumes their time is inherently more valuable than yours, that's no longer family. It's hierarchy. I also began documenting the comments I overheard because the walls in my house are thin and Brittany rarely lowers her voice. "Your mom seems stressed lately," she said one evening. "Maybe we should get her a spa day or something." Daniel replied casually, "She likes having projects. It keeps her busy, gives her purpose. I just don't want her burned out. We need her to keep things running smoothly." They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about losing their labor supply. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was Sunday morning. I was folding laundry in the hallway, and they assumed I was still asleep. "We'll have enough saved to buy our own house in about 2 years," Daniel said. "What about your mom?" Brittany asked. "Will she come with us, or stay here?" "I think she'd want to stay. Too many memories with Dad. And it works out. We'll have our space, but she'll still be around when we need help with kids or entertaining." "Perfect," Brittany replied. "Built-in support without us losing independence." They were planning their future, and in every version of it, I existed only as labor. They weren't thinking about me as a person. They were thinking about me as a resource. That afternoon, I started researching homeowner rights. If Brittany wanted to label me a housekeeper, then I needed to start thinking like a landlord. What I discovered was empowering. I had complete legal authority over who lived in the house. They had no financial claim, no tenancy agreement, no legal standing beyond my permission. Power feels different when you finally remember you have it. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer to confirm what I already suspected. "You are the sole owner," she said. "You have the right to change the terms of occupancy at any time. Family or not, boundaries must be enforced. Even if they're contributing to utilities and groceries? That doesn't constitute tenancy. They are guests, and guests can overstay their welcome." I left her office with my head held higher than it had been in months. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. When you stop trying to keep the peace and start enforcing boundaries, everything shifts, including your sense of self. During the week that followed, I started removing small privileges. I stopped doing their laundry. I stopped buying their specialty groceries. I stopped rearranging my schedule around their demands. The reaction was immediate. Brittany left a note. Laundry wasn't done. I left a response. "I don't do adult people's laundry." The next day, she left a list. Cleaning tasks, grocery items, kitchen prep instructions. I didn't touch it. Daniel approached me that night, confused. "Mom, Brittany said you didn't do anything today?" I looked him right in the eyes. "Correct." Silence is sometimes louder than confrontation. The tension grew. Brittany tightened her grip. More lists, sharper tone, increased demands, desperate to regain control. She had no idea that I had already made my decision. The notebook was full. The lawyer had confirmed my authority. All that was missing was the final moment, the moment that would justify everything. When Brittany sent that text ordering me to heat up the leftovers, she thought she was giving instructions to her housekeeper. She didn't realize she was speaking to the homeowner who had already decided to evict her. The first confrontation happened not that Tuesday evening when I received the leftovers text, but the following morning, when I served Brittany and Daniel something they were absolutely not expecting with their breakfast. Sometimes the strongest response to disrespect isn't yelling. It's documented, undeniable evidence. I didn't go home Tuesday night. I stayed at my friend Eleanor's house instead. While Brittany and Daniel sat waiting for their heated leftovers, I was on the phone with my lawyer drafting a document outlining new terms for living in my home. When I returned Wednesday morning, the scene in the kitchen confirmed everything I already knew. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, takeout containers scattered across the counters, and a handwritten note from Brittany reminding me that the laundry needs to be folded today. Only someone convinced they control you leaves housework instructions for the homeowner. I made breakfast, fresh fruit, pancakes, coffee, served on my best china. Not because I wanted to serve them, because I wanted to serve something else at that table. Reality. "Wow, Mom, this looks amazing," Daniel said, sitting down and helping himself. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "Oh, I did," I said, placing a manila folder beside each of their plates. "We need to discuss some changes." Brittany opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents: a copy of the house deed with only my name highlighted, a financial summary comparing my unpaid labor to their minimal contributions, a formal notice establishing new terms of occupancy, or vacate within 30 days. Watching Brittany's face morph from confusion to shock to outrage was more satisfying than any revenge fantasy I'd imagined. "What is this?" Brittany demanded. "It's clarification," I said calmly. "You are living in my home. These are the updated terms if you wish to continue doing so." Daniel blinked. "Mom, are you kicking us out?" "I am giving you a choice. Contribute fairly or find alternative housing." Their new terms were simple: rent contribution, real rent, not just $400 utilities, shared weekly chore rotation, respect for everyone's time and autonomy. I was offering them a choice: behave like adults or move out. Brittany's voice sharpened. "This is ridiculous. We can't pay rent and save for a house." "Then you'll need to decide which is more important," I replied. "We're already contributing." "Utilities and groceries?" I said, tapping the document. "Around $400 a month. Market rent for this house would be $2,800. Brittany froze. Daniel swallowed hard. "So, for 6 months you've been receiving the equivalent of $2,400 a month in free housing," I continued, "while demanding free domestic services on top of it. Numbers have a funny way of shutting down entitlement." Daniel looked genuinely stunned. "Mom, I didn't realize." "No," I said gently. "You didn't want to realize, because it benefited you not to." Brittany flipped to the chore rotation sheet, eyes widening at the idea she'd have to clean bathrooms. "I work full-time," she snapped. "I don't have time for all of this. I worked full-time for 35 years and managed a household. Time management is an adult skill." "That's different," she insisted. "You were a wife and mother. I have a career." Entitled people confuse delegating responsibility with having value. "Brittany," I said, voice steady, "housework is not genetic. It's learned. You and Daniel will learn." For the next hour they argued about fairness, finances, family loyalty. They used every manipulation tactic in the book. But I didn't budge. When you enforce boundaries, people who benefited from your lack of boundaries call you selfish. By the end of breakfast, they understood. They had 30 days to accept the new terms, or they needed to find another place to live. No debate. No renegotiation. After they retreated to their room to whisper and complain, I cleared the plates alone. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a servant. I felt like the homeowner. The woman they were used to controlling was gone. The version of me who remembered her worth had finally returned. The truth about how Daniel and Brittany really viewed our living arrangement came out that evening when I overheard a phone conversation that exposed their entitlement and confirmed that everything I suspected was true. People are never more honest than when they think you can't hear them. I was outside watering my roses around 8 p.m. when Brittany's voice drifted through their open bedroom window. She was on speakerphone with someone, pacing, agitated. "She basically threatened to evict us if we don't become her personal house servants," Brittany snapped, "after everything we've done for this place." Everything they had done? They contributed nothing except dirty dishes and demands. When entitled people get called out, they suddenly rewrite history as if they were the victims. "No, I know we're not paying real rent," she continued, voice dripping in irritation. "But we're family. She's supposed to help us get established, not exploit us for free labor." Exploit? I stood frozen, hose in hand, stunned at the irony. I had cooked, cleaned, did laundry, grocery shopped, and rearranged my life for them. Yet in her mind, I was the manipulator. Daniel thinks we should just agree to her terms temporarily until we can find our own place, she said. But I don't think we should reward that kind of behavior. There it was. The first clear admission that she had no intention of changing. Temporary compliance until things went back to how she wanted them. When someone plans to fake change just to regain control, you don't need negotiation. You need boundaries. Daniel came home from the gym shortly after and joined the conversation. I listened from the hallway as I gathered laundry baskets. Mom just wants to feel appreciated, Daniel said. If we thank her more, she'll relax. Appreciation, not participation, not respect. Just enough flattery to shut me up. I'm not scrubbing toilets, Brittany hissed. I didn't go to college to clean bathrooms. And your mother did? Daniel asked, sounding tired. She's retired, Brittany insisted. Her time should be helping us. That's what family is for. Entitlement always reveals itself in one sentence. That's what family is for. If Brittany had said, "Can we work this out?" I would have been open. But instead, she said the sentence that made me realize she didn't see a mother-in-law. She saw free labor. What if we just do a little more housework for a few weeks? Daniel suggested. Once she calms down, she'll go back to doing things herself. That's the plan, Brittany agreed. We'll just wait her out. They weren't planning to respect my boundaries. They were planning to outlast them. Later, Brittany lowered her voice to a smug whisper. Besides, she's lonely. She needs us more than we need her. That was the moment I stopped watering the roses, because suddenly, I wasn't hurt. I was done. Done being needed only for my service. Done being valued only when I was useful. Done being manipulated because they assumed I was afraid of being alone. The next morning, Brittany approached me with a smile plastered on her face, sugary sweet and completely fake. Margaret, I've been thinking, she said, tone dripping with false humility. Maybe we can start with small changes, like taking turns cooking dinner twice a week? When manipulators fear consequences, they don't change, they perform cooperation. No, I said, the terms are not negotiable. Her smile flickered. Well, I think sudden changes can be stressful. Maybe we should ease into things. I looked her directly in the eye. I eased into this for 6 months. The mask fell completely. This is really unfair. We're trying to build our lives. And I'm trying to live mine. Don't you care about Daniel's future? I care enough to teach him responsibility. Not enough to let him freeload off my retirement. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're education. Daniel entered the kitchen then, running a hand through his hair. Mom, we don't want things to be tense. Can't we just talk about a compromise? There is no compromise. Equal contribution or moving out. They stared at me like they didn't recognize the woman standing in front of them. And maybe they didn't. Because for the first time since they'd moved in, I wasn't asking. I was deciding. They had 30 days to choose. Respect or relocation. Either way, something was finally going to change. After discovering Daniel and Brittany's true intentions through their private conversations, I spent the following week in what I now recognize as strategic emotional recovery, using their disrespect as motivation to reclaim my home and my dignity, rather than continuing to enable their exploitation. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do after betrayal is refuse to keep participating in relationships that diminish your worth. The first step was acknowledging how much of myself I had lost in 6 months of prioritizing their comfort over my own well-being. I had stopped making plans with friends in case I might be needed. I abandoned hobbies that brought me joy because there was always something Brittany needed done. I even caught myself apologizing for wanting to read in the living room, in my own house, as though my preferences were interruptions rather than basic human rights. You don't realize how far you've disappeared inside a dysfunctional arrangement until you try to remember who you were before it began. But the most important realization was this: my generosity wasn't building family bonds, it was enabling two adults to avoid growth. By handling every domestic responsibility, I prevented Daniel and Brittany from developing the skills required to manage their own lives. By accepting disrespect, I taught them that my needs didn't matter if they clashed with their comfort. What I called support was actually dysfunction dressed up as kindness. Sometimes the most loving act is refusing to make someone else's poor choices comfortable or consequence-free. Tuesday evening, I stayed with my friend Eleanor. Over tea and lemon cookies, she said something that changed everything. You think you're helping them, but you're shielding them from adulthood. And she was right. Daniel and Brittany weren't growing, they were getting comfortable. Boundaries aren't rejection, they're education. Wednesday, I reached out to a family therapist for guidance. She confirmed what I already suspected. Your job is not to manage their responsibilities. Your job is to let them manage their own lives. She reminded me that support doesn't mean servitude. A professional naming the pattern transforms confusion into clarity. With that clarity, I made a decision. Change starts with actions, not discussions. Thursday, I stopped cooking for them. I cooked for myself only. I washed only my laundry. I grocery shopped for one. I didn't announce it. I simply stopped performing the labor they'd assumed was theirs by default. The results were immediate. The laundry pile doubled. Takeout containers stacked on the counter. The fridge became a barren wasteland of energy drinks and leftover sauce packets. They were paralyzed by the simplest tasks: grocery lists, meal planning, wiping down counters. When people are used to being served, independence feels like punishment. Friday, Daniel came to me with what he clearly believed was a brilliant compromise. Mom, what if we hire a cleaning service so nobody feels overwhelmed? Translation: we'll pay strangers to do the work as long as we don't have to do it. Daniel, I said, the issue isn't the workload. It's the lack of respect. He blinked, confused. Not because he disagreed, but because the idea of him cleaning his own bathroom was unthinkable. Entitled people don't avoid work because they can't do it. They avoid it because they believe they are above it. By Saturday, their strategy was clear: perform helplessness until I got frustrated enough to take control again. They left laundry in the washer, dishes in the sink, mail unopened on the counter. They were trying to wait me out. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt something else: powerful. Watching them flounder only proved how necessary these boundaries were. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I read books. I went out. I ignored Brittany's sighs and Daniel's confused glances. I enjoyed silence. I enjoyed my home. Recovery doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it just feels like breathing again. I wasn't trying to prove a point anymore. I was building my life back. The most satisfying part of my recovery came when I realized that enforcing boundaries didn't just stop Daniel and Brittany from exploiting me. It reminded me that I still controlled my own life. For months, I had let them treat my time, my home, and my energy as if all three existed for their convenience. But once I set the terms, written, signed, documented, the power shifted. People who try to make you feel powerless often reveal exactly where your power is, if you're willing to claim it. Within a week of the new rules, Daniel and Brittany's confidence began to crack. Their plan had been obvious: act helpless long enough so I'd eventually get frustrated and return to doing everything myself. Instead of feeling frustrated, I felt free, almost amused. Watching two grown adults panic over laundry and grocery lists was strangely clarifying. It proved what I'd suspected. They didn't respect me because they had never been required to respect themselves. When people struggle with basic responsibility, it's not incompetence, it's learned dependency. Once I stopped rearranging my life around their schedules, my days became mine again. I returned to my routines: book club, gardening mornings, weekly lunches with friends. The first time Brittany texted, "Where are you? We need to discuss dinner plans," I simply responded, "I'm busy." No justification, no apology. The silence that followed felt like fireworks. Brittany cornered me in the hallway. "It would be easier to coordinate meals if we knew your schedule." "I don't need to coordinate anything," I replied. "You're responsible for your own meals now." She blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. "But we aren't used to doing everything ourselves." "Then this is a perfect opportunity to learn. When you stop cushioning other people's lives, you force them to face the parts of themselves they've avoided." A strange thing happened after that. They began acting differently toward me. Suddenly, I received thank you instead of silence. They asked instead of demanded. They started wiping counters and loading the dishwasher without being told. It wasn't transformation, it was survival. They weren't being respectful, they were being strategic. People don't forget how to be respectful. They forget when there are no consequences for being disrespectful. 2 weeks into the new terms, Daniel approached me carefully, like someone trying not to spook a wild animal. "Mom, I feel like we've lost our closeness since all this started. It doesn't feel like family anymore." I set down my coffee. "Daniel, what we had before wasn't closeness. It was convenience. For you." He frowned. "I miss when we could just relax and enjoy time together." "That worked for you, because I was working behind the scenes to make relaxation possible." He didn't have a response to that. He didn't need one. The silence was enough. When someone says they miss how things used to be, what they really miss is benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Brittany's change in tactics was more transparent. Instead of commands, she expressed gratitude. Fresh flowers placed on the counter, a latte left at my door, a scented candle on the table with a handwritten note, "Thank you for everything." The gifts weren't for appreciation, they were currency. She was trying to buy back the version of me who would quietly fold laundry and heat dinner without asking for anything in return. A gift means nothing when it's used to avoid accountability. 3 weeks after the new boundaries took effect, I planned a weekend trip to visit my sister. I informed them, not asked, that I'd be gone from Friday to Sunday. "But what about meals?" Brittany asked. "What about laundry?" "I assume you'll handle them," I said. "Welcome to adulthood." When I returned Sunday evening, the moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me: old takeout and dirty dishes. The sink was overflowing. Laundry was piled like a collapsed mountain on the couch. Trash hadn't been taken out. Shoes were everywhere. It was a disaster zone. Daniel rushed toward me. "We were going to clean it before you got back." "But you didn't." "It's not that bad," he insisted. "We'll clean it now." "That's not the issue," I replied. "The issue is that you felt comfortable living like this because you assumed I'd fix it if you didn't." The problem wasn't mess. The problem was entitlement. In that moment, everything became clear. They weren't changing. They were performing compliance. They weren't learning to respect me. They were learning just enough to keep the benefits of living here. And I had no interest in living inside a performance. Real change doesn't require supervision. Only pretending does. That night, while the house echoed with the sound of their frantic cleaning, I sat in my bedroom, drinking tea, calm and certain. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was done. I realized the boundary wasn't temporary. It was permanent. I was no longer negotiating my worth inside my own home. I was reclaiming it. The final confrontation happened on a Monday evening, when I called Daniel and Brittany into the dining room for a conversation that would determine whether they would continue living in my home or start packing. Boundaries stop being suggestions the moment you enforce consequences. That morning, I met with my lawyer. I showed him the documentation of the weekend mess, the photos, the signed agreement, and he confirmed what I already suspected. Their behavior violated the terms of occupancy. I had every legal right to accelerate their move-out timeline. When they entered the dining room, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply placed a folder in front of each of them. We need to talk about the sustainability of this living arrangement. Daniel frowned. If this is about the mess, we told you. We plan to clean it. This isn't about dishes. It's about a pattern. Brittany opened her folder. Inside were 3 things: printed photos of the disaster they left while I was out of town, a copy of our signed household agreement, and a list of available apartments in their price range. She stiffened. You took pictures? That feels extreme. Documentation isn't extreme. Pretending the mess wasn't real is. Accountability feels like aggression only to people who are used to getting away with things. Daniel flipped through the papers. Mom, come on. It looks worse in pictures. The pictures look exactly like what I walked into. If the photos bother you, perhaps the behavior should bother you more. Brittany crossed her arms. We were going to clean before you came home. If respecting shared space only happens when I'm present to supervise, it's not respect. It's performance. Respect doesn't require supervision. Pretending does. I pressed play on a voice memo, recorded when I overheard them talking Sunday night. Brittany's voice filled the room. We'll just do the basics when she's around. She'll go back to doing everything eventually. She always does. Daniel's voice followed. Yeah. She won't kick us out. She hates conflict. Silence. Heavy, oxygen-stealing silence. Daniel looked at the floor. Brittany's face drained of color. When people show you their intentions, believe them the first time. Based on your choices, I said, I'm revising your move-out date. You now have 30 days to secure new housing. Daniel shot up from his chair. 30 days? Mom, that's impossible. Not impossible. Inconvenient. We don't have money for rent and saving for a down payment, Brittany snapped. Then you'll choose which one matters more. That's adulthood. Brittany scoffed. You care more about rules than your family. I held her gaze. Respect is not a rule. It's a minimum requirement. Daniel shifted his tone into guilt trip mode. You're choosing being a landlord over being my mother. No, I'm choosing not to abandon my self-respect to preserve your comfort. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always call your boundaries selfish. Brittany tried a softer tactic. We just need more time. We really appreciate everything you've done. If you appreciated it, you wouldn't have treated me like staff. We never meant for it to get like this, Daniel whispered. Intent doesn't erase impact. Apologies without change are manipulation. The proposals started coming fast. What if we just do dinners? What if we split cleaning but not laundry? What if we handle chores only on weekends? Each one was designed to preserve their comfort while appearing cooperative. No, I said simply. The arrangement ends in 30 days. Daniel looked wounded. So that's it? That's it. Brittany shoved her chair back. Fine, we'll leave. But don't expect us to come back when you're old and need help. I learned to live without Robert. I can certainly live without 2 adults who can't clean up after themselves. A threat loses its power when the thing being threatened is something you're no longer afraid of losing. They stormed out of the dining room. I stacked the empty coffee cups, carried them to the sink, and took a slow breath. No guilt. No shame. No doubt. Peace. For the first time in 6 months, the house felt like mine again. Not because they were gone, but because I finally was back. They would either grow, or they would go. Either outcome was freedom. You don't lose family when you set boundaries. You lose people who only loved what you did for them. 6 months later, I'm drinking coffee in my quiet garden, listening to the wind move through the rose bushes. The house feels peaceful, lighter somehow. For the first time in years, the peace comes from knowing I am no longer sacrificing myself to maintain relationships that only existed because I kept paying the emotional rent. The moment you stop allowing people to use you is the moment you start experiencing real peace. Daniel and Brittany moved out within 30 days. They found a small apartment that required budgeting, planning, and sharing responsibilities, exactly what they'd avoided while living here. At first, they were furious. Daniel accused me of choosing house rules over family. Brittany went around telling people I had changed overnight. They didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. When you stop enabling people, they don't miss you. They miss the benefits. By month 3, things shifted. Daniel called, voice softer than usual. "Mom, I didn't know how much work it takes to manage a home," he admitted. "I'm sorry we acted like it was nothing." He wasn't calling because he wanted me to fix something. He was calling because he was learning to stand on his own. Instead of expecting me to handle everything, he asked questions. Budgeting, scheduling, meal planning. He was developing skills, not outsourcing responsibility. Appreciation is born the moment someone realizes how hard something is to do on their own. Brittany took longer. She still complained about cleaning bathrooms, and I suspect she still thought housework was beneath her. But slowly, her competence grew. They became partners instead of two people competing to avoid responsibility. Their marriage got stronger. They learned how to negotiate chores, not weaponize them. They learned to plan meals, not assume someone else would cook. They learned to cooperate instead of compete. Shared responsibility builds shared respect, because you can't resent the person doing the same work you do. Daniel and I are closer now, not because I'm doing things for him, but because I stopped. When I stopped being useful, I became visible. He asks about my book club, my volunteer work at the library, my garden, my life. He sees me now, not as a convenience, but as a person. You stop being someone's background character the moment you stop playing their unpaid supporting role. I learned something too. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. Doors that only open for the people who treat you with respect. Love without boundaries becomes servitude. Help without limits becomes enabling. Generosity without reciprocity becomes self-erasure. If helping someone requires shrinking yourself, it isn't love, it's self-abandonment. If someone in your family treats you like you're responsible for their comfort, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to stop making their life easier at the expense of your own. You are allowed to choose yourself. Document what's happening. Patterns don't lie. People do. When someone claims you're overreacting, evidence reminds you that your reality is not an exaggeration. The moment you start documenting behavior, manipulation loses its power. Then, set boundaries. Real boundaries have two parts: expectations and consequences. If there are no consequences, you've made a suggestion, not a boundary. People who love you will adjust. People who are using you will resist. People don't get upset about your boundaries unless your lack of boundaries benefited them. And here's the final lesson. Choosing yourself is not cruelty. It is clarity. Healthy love requires respect. If someone needs you small, silent, or exhausted to stay comfortable, that's not family. That's dependency disguised as affection. Today, Daniel and Brittany come over for dinner sometimes. They bring food. They help clean up. They ask what they can contribute. Because now they understand effort. Now they understand gratitude. They became adults because I finally stopped protecting them from adulthood. Letting people struggle doesn't mean you're abandoning them. It means you're believing in their ability to grow. We sit together, we share stories, and we laugh. Not because I serve them, but because we respect each other. That's the difference boundaries make. Have you ever been treated like the housekeeper in your own family? How did you finally take your power back? Share your story below. Your voice may be the message someone else desperately needs to hear. And if you're still struggling to set boundaries, stay. Here, you're seen. Here, you're respected. Here, your story matters.